both plugged in? Yeah, we're both connected. Okay.
I'm a little not prepared. Are we ready? This is on?
Yes.
Okay. Go live. Okay.
I'm going to move this a little closer to us. Like that way. Okay.
Your mic's on?
Yes, my mic is on.
Okay.
Hi, this is episode 1 of our podcast, Exes to Allies.
It's fun getting on these chairs.
Okay. So episode 1. I'm dying. Okay. Episode 1 is in the beginning, Kylie's version, which is my story of the timeline of how we got to our arrangement, our current situation that we live in now currently. So the whole premise of the podcast is to share our relationship, how we co-parent together, how we cohabitate, and basically how we got here, because we share an ex-boyfriend. Okay, so before we start the episode, before I start talking about things, I do have an official disclaimer. The following narrative is based on personal experiences, opinions, and perspectives. The stories shared are a reflection of my own journey and interpretations of past events. While I strive to remain transparent and divulge the truth, we all know that memory is subjective and perspectives may differ. To the best of my ability, any identifying characteristics have been altered or omitted to respect privacy. This podcast is not intended to defame or accuse, harm, or misrepresent anybody. The purpose is to share experiences, foster understanding, and spark meaningful conversations. Any resemblance to real individuals, living or deceased, is purely coincidental unless explicitly stated, and if you are mentioned or have concerns, I welcome respectful dialogue. By listening or watching, you as the consumer are in acknowledgement that this content is personal storytelling and should not be taken as absolute fact.
Perspective is important.
Indeed, perspective is very important. Okay, and on that note, I will start at the beginning. So essentially, this will be a timeline breakdown that serves to highlight the amount of times that I moved, when each type of abuse that I experienced was most active or apparent, and my interactions with D before we opted to live together. 2012, I met the ex. I went to dental school that year, dental assisting school that year, and things between us were rocky. Good at times, but rocky. And that was the year that I experienced my first taste.
Right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, my first taste of physical aggression in regards to him. I was going to the bus stop to catch the bus to take the bus to school. I was in night school for dental assisting, and we were in some sort of petty argument, and I had my backpack on, and he grabbed me by my backpack and threw me down. In 2013, he and I broke up. We dated other people, both of us. The reason for our breakup is I did cheat. I was unfaithful first. I was unhealed from a previous relationship.
You're a bad girl.
And emotionally immature, to say the least. And I was unfaithful in our relationship, and that caused us to break up. He broke up with me, as he should. But not even right away. It was kind of toxic. Clock it. We dated other people. So when we were dating other people, when we were broken up that year, he had this girlfriend that he cheated on with me. And that is how we ended up kind of...
We both know that's a red flag now.
Starting a situationship, if you will. We did not get back together, but I ended up pregnant that year, at the end of that year. Like summer, fall of that year. And then, so that was the first like mental and emotional abuse that I experienced with him because of the dynamic between us. It was a situationship. There was no, committing on his behalf, even though I was pregnant with his child, and the way that I announced my pregnancy to him.
Another red flag.
He had a huge problem with it, brought it up constantly throughout the next several years. And I was living in Palm Springs, California at the time. And I was working, when I first got pregnant, I was working at a dental clinic. I was brand new at a dental clinic. And I was doing weekends at Native Foods Cafe. And so a little bit further on in my pregnancy, when I was about 6 months pregnant, I was fired from Native Foods Cafe. And then at the end of that year, the holidays of 2013 was when I met the family of the ex. I met them. I had never met them previous to being pregnant and taking a trip to Simi Valley and meeting them. So then in 2014, we are still living in Palm Springs. I had gotten evicted from the place that I lived at the time and moved in with him. And this is where a lot more mental and emotional manipulation comes in. And that's the year that we see the first real physical abuse. That's when I was pregnant with our oldest, and the whole altercation happened when the cops got involved and the courts got involved and all of that. 2014, there were a lot of women in and out of the picture. I was already pregnant at this time. We both knew it. To my knowledge, we were both excited about the new baby coming. And to my knowledge, there wasn't anyone else involved. I did kind of clock that he might gravitate towards one girl that he was working with, and he did end up getting involved with her. And for her protection and the peace of her family, she will remain unnamed, because she is no longer with us. Rest in peace. Those of you who know will know who I'm talking about. Those of you who don't, it's not really your business. But there was one woman specifically involved who he worked with. I kind of clocked that before it happened, and then I caught him in all of that. And that was right before you entered the picture. So he met you in April of 2014.
Man.
And so in June of 2014, our baby was born. I didn't know that she was in the picture at this point. He had decided to move to San Diego to be with you. He was telling me and his family and everyone that we knew a completely different story, that he was living in a house with roommates and college kids and like whatever the case may be. Are you able to close that maybe?
Dog problems.
Essentially, she was born in June, and then I found out about you November of that year. She had made some attempts to reach out to me on different social media platforms.
Because I was being lied to as well.
Because she was being lied to as well, obviously. He was living a double life, lying to me, lying to his family, lying to her, living with her. But we weren't aware of that. I was living with his mother and his sister at the time, his teenage sister. It was just a really messy situation, a very toxic situation from the very beginning. But narcissists are famously wonderful at manipulating. They're charismatic, they're intelligent, and it just, when you get tangled up with a narcissist, or if you have ever been tangled up with a narcissist, then you already know, you're fully aware. Okay, so 2014, finding out about you, I call this my canon event for the current timeline. This is the thing that ultimately brought us to here, was me finding out about you and the way I approached that situation. I did not walk away right away. Although I did eventually walk away, and I said, if that's how it's going to be, you can have it, I'm good. But it took me a few months.
If I had known what you knew, then I would have been out.
It took me a few months. Okay, so 2015, I was fired, wrongfully terminated. In 2014, we have already gone over that. So in 2015, I got my settlement money from that whole situation, and I moved to Joshua Tree initially with a friend of mine, and that just didn't end up working out. We had just personal differences. She was in a different place at the time in life than I was, and so I ended up moving back to Washington, which is where I'm from. This is when he started paying child support willingly. When I left the state of California, he said, hey, I'll support you, I'll pay child support, I make good money, et cetera, et cetera. So, the amount that was agreed upon initially was enough for me to make ends meet, for me to get on my feet and start over in another state. So then we go into 2016, I was living in Washington, I was working. He and I had minimal contact, but the child support was depleting. It was slowly going down by like a couple $100s a month.
When was this?
2016. And I believe that's when you ended up moving to the East Coast, right?
No, 2017. I think I was laid off in 2016.
Okay, so he was living with her in San Diego.
Yeah.
She was laid off.
Uber at the time. Oh, okay.
She was laid off, looking for other work, et cetera, et cetera. So you guys were experiencing financial hardship on your end.
Right.
That was not being communicated to me. I was just getting less and less and less child support.
Same company.
So then 2017, I was still living in Washington with our oldest. At this time, this was our only child. And this was the year that he told me that they break up. This is the year that you moved to the East Coast.
Yeah.
And he stayed on the West Coast and was supposed to follow you, which we'll go over in episode 2. She'll talk about her part of the story, but he stayed on the West Coast and told me that you guys broke up. I was in massage school, and his sister came to Washington to help me with the childcare situation, because I wasn't able to work enough and I wasn't getting enough child support in combination to go to school and also afford all the bills plus childcare. So his sister came to be our live-in nanny essentially and help with her while I was in school, essentially finishing the last half of school. 2018. In 2017, so she was only there for a few months. She went back to California at the end of 2017, and I had to figure out the last few months of massage therapy school. Yeah.
I went back to California in 2019.
I know, I'm getting there.
Oh, okay.
I'm getting there. His sister went back to California from Washington.
Oh, yeah.
Yes.
My bad.
Yes. And so then while his sister was in Washington, her and a good friend of mine kind of hit it off romantically. So we fast forward now to 2018. I have graduated from massage therapy school. I'm working as a massage therapist. And me and my best friend take a trip down to California to visit her, sister, and take our oldest to go see Dad because it had been a long time since she had seen him. And that was the year, that March, that Easter was when our second was conceived. Keep in mind, I think that they're not together, and she thinks that he's preparing to join her.
That's too funny.
And their new life on the East Coast that she is preparing for them.
Duped.
Lord have mercy.
Duped. Oh,
okay, so the end of that year, 2018, is when our second is born. Now, at the end of that year is when I am informed that you were not broken up and you had found out about our new baby. So now I'm in a pickle because I'm living with him now in San Diego. I have moved myself and our oldest down to California to live in San Diego while I carry our second baby, and she, I guess, is going through whatever she's going through. I'm excited. We welcome the baby, and then I find out, wait a minute, she's mad. And I'm like, well, why is she mad? And, well, the answer is because she's still the girlfriend.
We never broke up.
She's still the girlfriend. Fancy that. Okay.
He would say it was because I never left, but I'm like, wait, what? I did leave. I went to the East Coast. But
so then in 2019, this is one of the years that I have talked about, like, in hindsight, or in past posts, or when talking about it to people personally. I have referred to this year as one of our good years, because I wasn't aware of what was actually happening behind the scenes. I speculate this is when the current girlfriend came into the picture, was at the end of 2019, somewhere around Halloween, the holidays, because that year I caught him sending like fancy like perfume and other gifts to another woman who I assumed at the time to be her, but found out later to be the woman who he's with currently. We'll get there. So in 2019, there was like, he was doing his narcissistic thing, right? The mental and emotional and financial abuse really started to kick in this year because this other woman was in the picture. You were in the picture. He was living with me in San Diego and part-time with you in Huntington, right? In 2019? Mm-hmm. Right, which we'll get to when she tells her story. But there was like a lot of lies and manipulation and like all kinds of chaos happening. I call this one of our good years because this was one of the years that he and I didn't fight much. Unfortunately, I do have to put a little bit of a disclaimer on that part of the story because Super Bowl of 2019 is the first time that I was physically punched in the face.
Ooh.
So I started a job that year, and it was because there was a lot of financial abuse and mental and emotional abuse happening, and he was basically telling me like staying at home with the kids wasn't enough and I should be working on the weekends and all this other stuff. I now speculate that it was to free time for him to be doing what he was doing on the side, not because he actually wanted me to be working for fiscal reasons.
No. I've never seen somebody juggle so much in my life.
It's chaos.
Best juggler I've ever known.
It's crazy. And so that's the year that you moved back to California. Okay, so then we go into the year 2020. The year 2020, there are a solid 3 of us involved at this point. Now, I was not aware of the third woman until Easter of 2020. And that I call that, personally, I refer to that as our worst Easter. Because that is when, because I speculate that woman number 3 was involved, I also speculate that that's when the drugs started to kind of come into the picture.
For sure.
And he was drinking heavily at that point, so he ended up doing some jail time for some erratic, chaotic, crazy, scary behavior the night before Easter. So
that was the second time in jail, right?
Correct.
Yeah.
So now Easter Day is when I get a call from her on his phone because he left it behind because he was out of it. She called his phone, and his phone was there at the house with me, at the beach house with me, and she, I was like, oh hey, what's up? Coincidentally, I was on the phone on my phone talking to his sister about the bullshit and the chaos and just venting and being like, what the fuck? Why is this my life? And she was holding it down like she always does. And so then woman number 3 calls on his phone, which is right next to me, and I keep sister on the phone on my phone, and I answer and I talk to woman number 3, and I'm like, what's up, boo thang? Who's this? Like, do you know who I am? Like, are you aware that there's another girlfriend that lives in Huntington? Oh no. Can you do that? Get that for us?
Yeah.
There we go. If that paused the live, sorry guys.
Backwards.
So, essentially made myself known and made her aware of the situation in regards to there already being 2 of us involved. So 2020 is the famous shutdown, right? That's what happened in 2020. Yeah. So Easter happened right after or right before, right around the time of the shutdown, to the point where when he got bailed out of jail, he didn't come back home for Easter. He went to Arizona to be with her. And
I bailed him out of jail.
Oh yeah, you and his brother bailed him out of jail, but he went to Arizona to be with her because he didn't come home to me.
But time number 2 was when he got with my car.
Right. But he didn't come to you after he got bailed out,
right?
Yeah,
he did.
Oh, he came to Huntington.
Yeah.
Okay, so here's the deal. The reason why I know he ended up in Arizona is because the lockdown happened, and when the lockdown happened, he wasn't with you.
He was with me. Yeah.
He was with you?
Yeah.
He told me he was out of the state.
No, he was with me.
Okay,
he might have been with her sometime, and said that he was going to see you.
Oh, see, so he was bouncing between him and her. during the lockdown when it first
I
happened.
can't even handle one person.
But he wasn't coming
3.
home to me and the kids. So there was a point where I had not seen him or had any help with the kids for about 4.5 weeks. Ooh. And I called my sister at that point and I was like, come get me. So in May of 2020, my sister came from Washington to get me and the older 2. We didn't have our 3rd yet, okay? So I left California with the kids. Can you decline that?
Oh.
Or it's okay. You can let it count down. I left California with the kids and went back up to Washington. And he stayed, I guess, with you and with her, right?
Yeah, I mean, he told me sometimes that he was like, I gotta go home to see the kids. You know?
Okay. So he was bouncing between the 2 of them. There was a lot of financial abuse in regards to me and the kids. When I left, he was like, you kidnapped the kids from me. I'm not giving you anything. I'm not helping you. I'm not supporting you. You took the kids against my will. Hold on to that tidbit. We'll circle back around. So then 2021. So at the end of 2020 is when he and I decided together that we were going to co-parent. He was willing to financially support the kids and I if we were willing to come back to California in order to make it easy for him to see the kids as much as possible. And that's because having 2 kids in childcare is an absolutely insane expense. Mm-hmm. And it didn't really make sense in our situation for me to be working full time and us be paying childcare for 2 kids full time, right? Mm-hmm. And the shutdown was like still a thing. So the oldest was doing distance learning and all of that. Like, it was a whole thing, right? So the agreement was I would bring the kids back to California. He would pay the bills, make sure we were taken care of, and come see them as much as possible, spend as much time with them as possible, etc., etc. I do believe I had told him, like, if I can figure out a way to bring in some money, I will. But I never really put any priority on that. So that at the end of 2020, we moved back to California. We were staying with his sister very briefly. So that was the holiday that woman number 3 was out of the picture. They were broken up at that point. He was fully back with you. He and I were not together. We were just co-parenting and we were living with his sister. So we had a family Christmas at his sister's house and you spent that elsewhere, and she'll talk about that on her episode next week.
Well, if I remember.
It's okay. It's okay. She'll
the
remember.
RV,
we'll go. Yeah, the RV. That was the RV Christmas.
Yeah.
Yep. So 2021, I moved with my kids to the top of the mountain in Idlewild, California. I call that our good year number 2. That was the year that we successfully co-parented with the least amount of drama and conflict. He was with you. There was not any other women involved that we're aware of at that point.
We had such a good time during that time.
2021. So that was also the year that was easy, consistent co-parenting. That was the year that we spent the oldest birthday all together on the mountain, the whole family. She was there, I was there. That was our first time, I think, kind of commingling.
Yeah.
And then we also, at the end of that year, the holidays of 2021, ended up having the meshed holiday where you were there and I was there and all of that. So now, disclaimer on that. So that holiday, he was starting to act really weird towards me, and maybe even you, but towards me, and saying like, oh, you know, Kylie wasn't invited to the family Christmas. Why is she here? his sister was hosting the Christmas and had personally invited me. So it was a very weird, like, attempt at manipulation and, like, gaslighting.
Yeah,
but the reasoning is because he and I, that December, had started fooling around again. And I didn't know it yet, but I was pregnant at the time, that Christmas.
Oh, God.
Like, barely pregnant. So he was acting really weird towards me because we were in the same space and he was feeling very uncomfortable about that. I was playing it cool because I was not trying to wreck their relationship. Like, at that point, I was just getting my rocks off with my baby daddy. Like, it was not anything personal.
I bought you a blanket.
Like, I know, you did. That was my favorite blanket for a long time. And then Madeline took it from me. So... previous to 2021, there had been a lot of triangulation happening on his end, doing everything possible to talk shit about her to me, talk shit about me to her, involve his family in the gossip and the shit talking and the chaos. Getting them really, like, entrenched in the double life so that when I got pregnant for the third time, his family was fully aware the whole time from the beginning, because I rock hard with that family, like, and I always have, but you were his girlfriend. So they knew, and I knew, and he knew, and you didn't know. And actually, when the phone call was made to his brother, to tell his brother about the baby, we were all together, and the ex was laughing about the fact that you were the only person that didn't know now.
Oh.
Because we were finally breaking the news to brother.
Who was laughing?
The ex was, our ex,
the
narcissist, was laughing on the phone.
Oh, that makes
like,
it even worse.
Now Dee's the only person that doesn't know about the new baby. And trust and believe, brother called him out on that shit. Brother was like, oh, that's really cringy. That's not a good thing. Yeah, that's not a good thing.
Definitely cringy.
Made him feel real stupid, I'm pretty sure. Okay, so, 2022 is when woman number 3 comes back into the picture, but not until the middle of the year. So, 2022, I'm pregnant with baby number 3. You are still the girlfriend.
He
and
told me
you
you
guys,
got raped.
Oh yeah, he told her that I got
raped by the maintenance guy.
Graped.
Oh,
Remember,
sorry.
we're on.
Yeah.
Yes.
My bad.
He told her that I was graped by our maintenance man and that the baby was the product of that. Yeah. When he told her. But he didn't tell her until several months in, okay? And he didn't tell you until you found out yourself, basically, right?
Yeah.
Okay, which she will go over in episode 2 when she tells her story, but essentially me and the family and his best friend and co-workers all knew about baby number 3 for several months before you did. Now, you found out in May.
That's cute.
Right? You guys went on a vacation together, a romantic vacation getaway, and then you came back. Right? Yeah. Then they came back, and then there was like some sort of other like vacation getaway to Vegas, and that's when you found out about baby number 3. And so you found out in Vegas, and basically were like, peace the fuck out, I'm not dealing with this.
Yeah.
So that's when woman number 3, who was in the picture before, then exited for a while, she comes back in because he, as a narcissist, is severely codependent and can't fucking be alone with his shit. And gives woman number 3 a little jingling on the phone and is like, hey, come to Vegas. And she's like, okay, and goes. And essentially that's when the drugs start, like really start. Now, it's a slow build from May until about July.
Yeah, for sure.
It's like an intermittent chaos, drama, weirdness. July of 2022 was when I was in Washington. Me and the ex were supposed to be looking at houses, and because he was working at the time up there, we were supposed to be looking at houses and moving the family up there and letting go of, because he still kept the beach house in San Diego this whole time.
You mean my beach house?
Yeah, she was living there when he met her and basically took it over and then moved us in, and we moved out, and they moved back in, and she moved out, and then we moved back in, and then it was a whole thing. I ended up moving back into the beach house in 2022. Okay. Yeah, Jerry Springer is not with us anymore. That's why we're doing this podcast.
Yeah, he would have a heyday with this one.
I'm telling you, Jerry Springer, Dr. Phil, Sally Jesse Raphael.
Oh my god.
Fucking Oprah.
You're bringing Sally out of the woodwork, man. I forgot all about her. Oh my god. Ready to close TikTok? No, we're not.
Oh, okay. You gotta do it. Oh, I have to do the thing. Sorry, guys. Okay. Okay, sorry for the pause. Say it louder for the people in the back. Oh, he was supposed to come back from Vegas. Yeah, right? And he didn't. Okay. So, 2022. You left. I went to Washington. Woman number 3 was involved. He started getting on the drugs and the heavy drinking and all of that because you had left. You had taken away his stability, essentially.
Yeah.
And I was just bearing the brunt of it all because I was pregnant and under the impression that we were supposed to be moving our family to Washington. And so we were supposed to be letting go of the beach house and the mountain house. So I moved me and the kids out of the mountain house to the beach house, expecting that was going to be a very, very temporary transition. 6 to 8 weeks was the timeline I was given. And let's just say I never left the beach house until shit really went down. So because the job in Washington fell through, that was the height of like all forms of abuse. Physical abuse, verbal abuse, financial abuse, all of it. 2022 was crazy because the end of 2022 was the birth of baby number 3. You came back into the picture very briefly because you had left and then you came back. And that's when like his bender started, right? We did Vegas at the end of 2022. It was supposed to be, it was told to me that he and I and the 3 kids, the 5 of us, were going on a family vacation to Vegas for a week. And it ended up being...
All of us were there.
All 3 of the women were there, plus the 3 kids. I was there with the 3 kids. We were being locked out of hotel rooms. We had a Tesla rented in my name that he took from me for several days. I didn't have access to the vehicle I had rented. Our newborn baby, our 3rd born child, was only a couple weeks old at this point. Tell me why I thought it was okay to take a newborn baby on vacation to Vegas. Out of it, okay? The postpartum hormones, clearly my brain was not doing what it was supposed to at that point. We'll circle back around to that because that's relevant. But that's when the bender starts and like the scary stuff really started for me.
It got super scary.
Okay, so then 2023 is the catalyst to our agreement, like the last like thing that really brought us to where we are now. So I ended 2022 just being like, dude, do whatever you're doing. I have our kids to take care of. I was crammed in the beach house, which was 1 bedroom with 3 kids. All of the neighbors had been alienated by this point. None of them were willing or able to help or anything because of his chaos and the screaming in the alleyway and the slamming of doors, and he was cussing people out, and it was chaos. It was crazy. So 2023 is when things really got really bad. Everything fell apart. The beginning of 2023, he and I took a trip with the kids to Legoland. And that's when I found out that woman number 3 was fully in the picture and had been for quite a while. That was, he was really on a good one at that point. That's when Bubbles, the whole Bubbles incident happened. He ended up with some random methed out, like, street girl from Palm Springs area, like this random girl named Bubbles. He ended up hooking up with her in a family member's like garage. Very awkward. While me and his kids were in a hotel room waiting for him. He didn't come home at all. At that point, you were already gone because this is like February, March of 2023. So you were gone.
Country,
She had experienced a lot at that point and fully cut ties and was gone. So now it's just me and the other woman who he's currently with at this point, but he's got random people in and out. Like he took like some trips to Hawaii and he hooked up with some random people. He took trips to Vegas and hooked up with random people.
He's on a good
the
one.
shit that people do when they're on a bender. Okay.
Real good one.
So this is like the co-parenting failure because he lost his stability completely. He lost his job. I wasn't working, you were not supporting him, and I don't know what was going on with the other girl, but I'm sure she was probably pouring money into the situation, not really realizing what everything really actually was. So then the middle of that year is when I had a mental breakdown between the abuse and the postpartum hormones and the lack of stability and the lack of support. I just couldn't take it anymore.
He wasn't buying y'all food.
It was a mess. He wasn't buying food. He wasn't paying the bills. He was threatening me. He had broken my phone at one point, although he did replace it. That's the phone I have now. I've had that for a couple years.
You got a 3 days to pay or quit letter.
Yeah, we got a letter to move out. And then once again, all of the neighbors were alienated. They were done by this point. So nobody was like willing to help. CPS got involved because I was calling like all the resources that I could. I had called 211 in San Diego. Like that girl knew me personally, like after the first couple of weeks, because she was just giving me every possible resource she could. And unfortunately, because San Diego is so populated, there just is such a long list and there just aren't enough resources. Needs can be met, but it's not immediate. And like I lived on the very, like on the coast, like on the boardwalk of the beach by the ocean. And many of the resources for San Diego County are inland. So it was like a 30-minute to 2-hour bus ride one way with 3 kids to try to get to some food. Just shit that's not feasible when you're in that situation. And I felt really helpless and really hopeless. And so I essentially handed my kids over to the state, knowingly but also unknowingly. So I thought I was getting a different type of help than what was actually being offered to me, and that put me in a little bit of a bind with social services and child protective services, like all of that. So the kids went to the Polinsky Center, and then he got them out of the Polinsky Center because of how all of that went down. And I was under the impression that I was going to get my kids back because I've always taken care of our kids. I've always had custody of our kids. He's always been I'll visit when I can dad. And so I thought he and I were agreeing to just do whatever it took to get the kids out of the custody of the state, and that I was going to get them back. What actually happened is him and this other woman decided to take my children out of the state.
So they give your kids to
them.
Somebody who's actively on
drugs, abusing us,
alcohol, 3 DUIs, and then
has no job.
Somebody who's a former heroin addict, and they gave your kids to them.
And they gave our kids to them, but I signed the papers knowing that they were getting the kids, but I was
you didn't want them to go in the foster system.
Because I didn't want them to go into the foster system, but I was under the impression, because they made me under the impression that the kids would be back with me within a few days.
They said they weren't allowed to leave the state and stuff. Right?
Yeah, so that was one of the stipulations, that our oldest was supposed to finish her school year, which was like 11 more days of school or something. There was several stipulations, and they were all broken. They took the kids out of the state to go live at her house, in this house that they had never been with, in this woman that they had never been in, with this woman they didn't really know.
1-year-old baby.
Not even one.
He wasn't even one.
He was 9 months old at the time.
So insane to me.
They took my infant from me when he was 9 months old, and would not let me see him. Now, one of the stipulations when they were released into our custody from the state was that his mother, right, the kid's grandma, could be a third party person that could be a part of the visitation, a mediator, so that I could spend time with the kids. Mm-hmm. That did not happen. Not one time.
Right.
So then when I found out that he moved the kids to Arizona, we had already had the eviction notice, and shit was just falling apart. So I took everything I could that was worth anything in that beach house, and I sold it. I sold it, and I shipped a bunch of my shit back to my sister in Washington, and I moved. I fed myself. I did what I had to do. I took a couple weeks, and I moved. And I did unfortunately have to leave a lot of our stuff behind, and I lost all of that stuff ultimately, because once again, I was under the impression that I was co-parenting with someone who was normal and civil and had empathy and would send me the important things that I was leaving behind. To my knowledge, they were tossed away. All of our stuff was just thrown away, or put on the side yard of his grandma's house to be ruined in a hurricane later that year. So, when all of that went down, I moved to Washington, and I stayed with my sister, and I got really close to my friend, one of my best friends up there. And if it wasn't for that friend and her family, and then my main employer at the time at the coffee shop in Yakima, if it wasn't for them, I would not have been able to make it to Arizona, like in the way that I did. The support that I had when I moved back to Washington after all this went down, I have never had that much support in my life. You were in part of that. You had helped me get some things moved and figure out the logistics of all of that. And I was in contact with you just kind of like here and there, in regards to that. So I spent several months in Washington just kind of like figuring out what the next step was, how I was going to get my kids back, where they were, the logistics of all of that. Because
he wouldn't even let you talk to them.
He wouldn't let me talk to them. It was a very abusive situation in that regard. I would try to have a FaceTime call with the kids, and he would scream at me or berate them or just make it really awkward for them. It was a bad situation. But they did not have it together with the parenting because CPS got involved with them, and I was informed of that and ultimately got myself to Arizona. So found out exactly where the kids were, applied for a job, got a job, moved myself to Arizona, put my stuff in storage, moved myself to Arizona. Like I said, the support system that I had in Yakima at that time was like crucial to getting to Arizona. So then November of 2023 is when I got to Phoenix. I started that job. I, was living in the pad split situation, right? It's like a room share. So I was renting a room in a house with a bunch of other people. I met the boys. And which was a big shift in my life because at that point I was super jaded. I was anti-men. I was like 100% like just never going to fuck with men ever again at that point, like in my life. And the boys at the pad split in Phoenix really helped kind of shift my perspective and helped me realize that while I have been dealing with a lot of chaos and drama and narcissism and abuse, there are still... Can you just kind of...
Yeah.
Sorry, guys. There are still good men in the world. Good men who are worth fostering positive dynamics with. And then my sister had a really big shift in her life to where she couldn't be a support system for me anymore. And that is what led up to our agreement. Our
October.
So yeah, our agreement became what it was because I didn't really have a support system anymore. My friend that was supporting me in Yakima, her situation shifted, and then my sister's situation shifted, and basically because of the abuse that was still happening, it was really hard for me to spend an appropriate amount of time with my kids. And when I was seeing the kids, he was using that as like a pawn, like a manipulation tactic of like, okay, yeah, you can see the kids on your days off this week. And then I'd say like, okay, well, my next shift starts at, let's say 10 a.m. on Tuesday, so I will drop them off at 8 a.m. on Tuesday. And I would go to drop them off at 8 a.m. on Tuesday, and he'd be like, oh, nope, sorry, can't take them. Guess you're going to have to figure it out. Sorry, I'm not your babysitter. And so I missed enough work, a couple weeks worth of work enough to where the finances were not in my favor and I was stuck, and it was going to be to a point where I didn't have the ability. Either I was going to have to give up time with my kids to work to catch up, and he was going to use that against me and say, well, I thought you wanted to see your kids. I thought you wanted to be a mom, blah, 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 blah. All the stupid, dumb shit that narcissistic, abusive weirdos do. Or I was going to end up homeless on the streets, unable to provide for myself. So I basically told you what the situation was, and that's when you said...
Yeah, I said you should just come here because honestly, I just thought it was messed up that you couldn't even co-parent with them, After everything you had been through, it's like you were making every effort and it just seemed messed up.
I was making every effort, and I met him on his terms, you know what I mean? I was letting, the kids were living with them. I was seeing the kids. I was visiting my kids a couple days a week when I had time off from work. Like, the roles had been switched, and because they had been the opposite way for so long, I was willing and able to be flexible and try to make the 50-50 dynamic work and let him be the main household for a while and visit with the kids. But the problem was he was being very abusive about it and being very manipulative and sabotaging my ability to work and see the kids at the same time. And so he basically backed me into a corner. And when I had explained to him and I had told him, hey, you have once again backed me into a corner where I'm not going to have any option but to leave the state. And he basically laughed at me and was like, that's not my problem, figure it out, you're a fucking idiot, blah blah blah, whatever, right? More abusive stuff.
How he tried to get you to have sex on the third woman's bed.
Oh yeah, okay. So when I was in Phoenix, he solicited me for a little fun time.
Hanky panky.
While he was living in her house, fully committed to her. They now have a baby. They have a baby together. I don't know if she knows.
Is this real life?
If she does know, couldn't be me. We listen and we very much judge in that situation.
I have had, yeah.
But yeah, that's the tea and that's the timeline of how we got here. So 2023, at the end of 2023, me and the kids spent the holidays there in Phoenix. And the last day that he saw the kids was Christmas Day of 2023. Because I was supposed to drop the kids back off so that I could work on New Year's. Remember this? I was supposed to drop the kids back off with him so I could work on New Year's. And what was his response? Sorry, me and my girlfriend are out of this state and we're not going to be back until later next year, referring to 2024. You're going to have to figure it out. Sorry, I'm not your babysitter. So I called her and I said, this ain't going to fucking work. I have no choice now. If your offer still stands, I'm taking it. I'm driving your way tomorrow. I said, I'm packing my stuff and I'm driving your way tomorrow. I'm pretty sure is what I said. And then we figured out that it was better for me to leave the next day or something like that instead.
Yeah, something like that.
But I got here with the kids at the end of the first week of January 2024.
The 5th of January.
Yep. And that's where we're going to leave episode 1.
Well, the Idlewild situation, that was a good time.
It was, yeah. That was probably the most no, not probably. 2021 was the most functional that all of us were collectively within that.
I was driving back
dynamic.
and forth 2.5 hours to and from Idlewild, so that we could spend, every weekend, and we even sometimes stayed over the week and stuff with his kids. And, it seemed pretty normal then. But anyway, that's the reason why, that was the main reason I was like, you guys should just come here. Because, I functioned as a stepmom for a long time. So, yeah.
Right. So your investment was in the kids because we didn't know each other.
Right.
As humans, as people. Oh, we've been on live long enough that it's making us...
Okay. Well, that's a good place to leave.
Yeah, so we'll leave episode 1 here, but we didn't know each other when I first moved here. We were strangers.
Yeah.
Essentially, we had been in the same spaces civilly a couple of times. Yeah, by civilly, that means we were not talking shit to each other and mean mugging each other. We were basically ignoring each other's existence and not interacting or engaging, just being respectful because we were both there for the kids and for the family event and the dynamic and whatever. And, his family's a very close-knit family. They're very like tight knit, they're close, they're very loving, and they do a lot of like holidays and events together. And so that was the dynamic that we were working with that year, that, you know, things went really smoothly. But once again, in hindsight, it wasn't going very smoothly because him and I were intimately involved.
Yeah.
And I actually misspoke earlier. We were intimately involved that whole year.
I'm sure.
Because there was another pregnancy between the middle and the youngest that I terminated. And that was like a whole thing. So I do want to end with this because this is our introductory episode to the podcast. I don't mind it being a little bit longer. All of the videos that are left on this TikTok account, Exes to Allies, from before we started our podcast, are videos that were relevant to the situation that we were experiencing. The abuse I was experiencing, the triangulation, it really kind of shows the timeline of when I moved around, where I was, and the mindset that I was in during all of those different phases during each year of this situation. And it gives a really authentic glance into how I could have personally been manipulated on that level in those ways. Now, of course, the ultimate disclaimer for all of this is that I am not innocent in any of this. This is not a blame game situation. Yeah. I was very much a part of all of it. You know, I am a yapper. I like to talk. Yes. I love to get the last word in, especially when I feel slighted, and I very much feel slighted very often by our ex.
Yeah.
And even
it's hard enough.
Friends and family members, in regards to their actions and reactions and support, or even sometimes lack of support in this situation, because of their own personal, you know, relationships with him and how that played into things. So nobody's perfect, you know, and I take full accountability for my part in things.
Me too.
But this episode just serves to kind of give a timeline of my side of things and how and why I would agree to my side of our arrangement, which was to bring me and my 3 kids and my cat and what could fit into my car at the time.
Many states away.
All the way across the country, from Arizona, aka the West Coast, to the East Coast where we live now. So,
tune in for next week.
Yeah, next week.
It's going to be all about my juicy story.
Is Dee's side of the story. She will go into detail in regards to the timeline on her end.
Probably a bit more into the abuse, just because, you know, part of my motivation is to, you know, give people that information, because I remember being somebody who didn't know anything about it. So I think the more the information gets out there, the more that it'll help people. So Absolutely. Yeah, bringing light to the fact that 2 very intelligent women were duped, manipulated, abused for over a decade for me. My relationship with our ex started in 2012. And obviously I shared children with him, so that will be a forever thing, you know, as long as we both shall live. But we were never married, and that's so crazy that we have 3 kids together over the course of a decade, essentially, and we're never married. And you were with him during that time, and then there was also a 3rd woman involved who he is codependently. At least the 3rd woman, let's be honest.
Oh, I mean, there were a lot of other women in the mix, and I mean a lot, in and out. but none that were key players in the situation. The 3 key players are me, Dee, and the woman who he's with now, who is now the mother of his new youngest child number 4, which is wild to me because how the fuck are you gonna have a whole new child and not provide at all?
Ones that you have already.
Not provide at all, or even like visit them or see them at all. That's crazy. We will get into that further on more episodes, so tune in. This episode will be streaming on Spotify for podcast if you didn't get to finish, or if you had to jump in and out of the live. We will have it edited and streaming for you guys midnight on Monday, Spotify for podcast. If we can get it up and running, we'll have it available on Apple Podcasts as well. So
and come see us next Saturday night.
Next Saturday night,
9 p.m.
9 p.m. Okay, bye guys.